Election season is here. Who gets to participate in Nevada's primaries, and how might changes to the Voting Rights Act impact Nevada voters? Plus, tracking the treatment of Alzheimer's disease.
There are 192 trials this year testing 158 drugs. So there's a very robust pipeline of drugs that are being tested to see if we can affect all different types of Alzheimer's disease symptoms.
How an annual report from UNLV is contributing to global efforts to combat the brain disorder, and
because behind every flag, behind every anthem, behind every moment of peace, there's a face. Let's make sure they're not forgotten.
Honoring the men and women who fought for this country, a local photographer celebrates America 250 with portraits of those who served and sacrificed. That's this week on Nevada Week.
Support for Nevada Week is provided by Senator William H. Herrnstadt and other supporters.
Welcome to Nevada Week. I'm Amber Renee Dixon. Nevada's primary election season starts May 23rd. Right now, nonpartisan voters make up the largest group of registered voters in the state, and if you're one of them, you will not get to vote in any partisan primary races. That's because Nevada has a closed primary system, meaning only registered Republicans can vote for Republican candidates and only registered Democrats can vote for Democratic candidates. Efforts to change that are underway. Meanwhile, experts continue analyzing how a recent Supreme Court ruling could impact Nevada elections. Joining us to explore these issues are former Republican State Senator Warren Hardy and founder of Vote Nevada, also a CSN history professor, Sandra Cosgrove. Welcome back, both of you, to Nevada Week. Sandra, you believe that nonpartisan voters in Nevada should get to vote in partisan primaries. Why?
Because they're taxpayers, and taxpayer funds pay for those elections. And as a woman, I find it ironic that I'm told that it's wrong to force me to produce a marriage license in order to register to vote, but yet it's perfectly okay to say I should have to join a private political organization in order to be able to vote.
Okay, but you are referencing something that has not yet passed, the
right.
Save America
Act.
Okay, so that's not happening quite yet, but it's a possibility, just to clear that up. Okay, Warren, what do you think about voting in partisan primaries by nonpartisan voters?
You know, I've evolved into a big supporter of open primaries for different reasons than Dr. Cosgrove. Under closed primaries, we've got the far right that controls those primaries on the Republican side, and we've got the far left. So think of it as, I would say, MAGA and woke. And those are the folks that get through the primaries into the general elections. So moderates or people in the center, which the overwhelming majority of the country is either center left or center right, really doesn't have much of a say in general elections. So I completely support open primaries for a different reason than Dr. Cosgrove.
Help our viewers understand the opposition to open primaries, though. There is a concern that maybe someone who is truly a Democrat could register as a Republican and then get in and try to mess with the primary.
But that's not an open primary. So what you're talking about is a semi-open primary, where I could walk in and say I'm going to vote a Democratic ballot or a Republican ballot. Open primary is everybody's on the same ballot and you pick one. So if I was a registered Democrat and I voted for the Republican, well, then I'm voting against the Democrat. So right now in our judicial races, in our mayor races, everybody's on one ballot. You get to pick one person. If you don't pick the person that you want, they're not going to win.
So what you're proposing could potentially end up with, I guess, 2 Republican candidates in the race for governor in November? I'm a little confused.
We get whoever the voters pick. It doesn't matter about the parties. The parties do not control our democracy. They're not in our Constitution. Voters are. So if voters pick 2 Republicans, then we get 2 Republicans. They might pick 2 Democrats.
And would it only be the top 2 vote getters?
If we went in the way that California does it, we'd be top 2.
Okay.
I mean, the Democrats are wringing their hands about that very issue right now. There's 5 Democratic candidates for governor and 2 Republicans, and they're doing the calculus that 2 Republicans might advance. So I get it; those are cited, but those are things that should be dealt with in your party structure, right? We shouldn't build our process around that. I think the reason we've had difficulty in Nevada is that we've had this ranked choice voting concept, which is very confusing for the public. I think the first time when it passed, people just said, yeah, open primary, I get to vote whoever I want. The second time it came around, which was required constitutionally, the opposition was able to confuse the issue by trying to explain ranked choice voting, which is a very complicated thing where your first choice and then your second choice. And it's just, but it's confusing to the public. And,
You need voter education.
No, 100%. We need voter education in a lot of ways, but I think that's the reason it's had difficulty. Not the concept of open primaries themselves, but the confusion about how they're going to work.
Right. So that was question 3, which was on the 2024 ballot. It did not pass in 2024. It did pass in 2022.
Right.
And that combined open primaries and ranked choice voting. How is this potential ballot question you are proposing, because you are proposing to have open primaries on this ballot?
We're actually proposing to say that every voter has to be treated equally in every election that's taxpayer funded. And then the state can decide what that looks like, because there's many variations of open primary. But I think a lot of nonpartisans would like to just be able to vote for the person. You know, if I want to vote for you, I shouldn't be told I can't if I'm an eligible voter. So that would be everybody just on the same ballot.
Okay, and how does that differ?
Which is required by the Voting Act of 1965, right? That's what's required. Equal treatment.
Which
Yes.
we're going to talk about. But how would this ballot measure differ from question 3?
So question 3 was open primaries. Top 5 candidates move forward to the general election, and then voters can rank their candidates when they vote in the general. All we're doing is saying, put in the Voter Bill of Rights, it's in our Constitution, that every voter has to be treated equally in every election that's taxpayer funded.
So question 3 had opposition from both Democrats and Republicans, and that was the combination of primaries and the ranked choice voting. Warren, do you expect that what Sandra is proposing will have the same amount of opposition?
From the internal operations of government and political parties, yes. There's a perception that each party somehow benefits from the current system, but they don't matter at the end of the day. I think to Dr. Cosgrove's point, if we can do a good job of educating the public about what this really means and more importantly what it doesn't mean, and I think talking about it in the context of being constitutional under both the state Fair Voting Act and the federal act, people will, I think, look at it in a different way.
So if that does get on the ballot, what is the status of that?
So we're running into a very weird problem when it comes to getting the petition signed. A lot of the young people who are registered nonpartisans, they're about 55% nonpartisan. When we put the piece of paper in front of them, they're looking at us and saying, I don't want to put my signature and address on a piece of paper when I don't know what you're going to do with it. So because of a lot of the privacy issues and kind of weird AI stuff we're having, they don't trust. They get out their phone and they're like, I want to use 2-factor authentication. Don't you have a QR code? So we're actually thinking about doing another ballot initiative that's statutory to allow for electronic signature in 2 years.
Do you think that this is going to get on the ballot this year then, the open primary
I think it's going to be
question?
close.
Okay. If it does get onto the ballot, it would have to pass in this election and the next general election in order to amend the Nevada Constitution, similar to the voter ID measure that passed in 2024 and is coming back again this year. Let's move to the Supreme Court ruling on the Voting Rights Act of 1965. This stems from a case out of Louisiana. The district map was redrawn, and it resulted in the addition of a second majority black district. So Louisiana has 6 U.S. House districts. 2 of them would have become a majority black district. The Supreme Court ruled that that redrawn map relied too much on race and violated the constitutional principle of equal protection under the law. This has led several states to try and redistrict ahead of the midterms. What impact will this have in Nevada? Sandra, you start, and then Warren.
I don't think it's going to have an impact here. No one has said they're going to sue. No one has said, the governor hasn't said, I'm going to call the DOJ in, Department of Justice. So I don't think it's going to have any impact now. After the election, we could see something happen.
What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's anything short term that's going to change in Nevada. We're not looking at redistricting for political purposes. We're not looking at any of those things. But I think it's going to drive a really serious discussion among academics, among the jurists, and hopefully the public about what the original intent of the Voting Rights Act was. It was to ensure that everybody had equal access. Nobody was to be discriminated against for any reason, really. And that's sort of evolved into what we now do in gerrymandering and redistricting. We do it along racial lines, we do it along socioeconomic lines, we do it along rural lines, all these sorts of things. And I think it's important that as Nevadans, we protect the ability to decide how we want our redistricting to be done and do it whenever we want. That's what the Constitution provides for. In Nevada, we have a unique, interesting thing that says we can look at community of interest. So even if, depending on how the case law plays out at the federal level, continuing to do party lines the way we do them, I think has that extra level of protection in Nevada because it specifically says you can look at special interest group, or what's the word, not special interest? Community of interest.
Yeah, community
Such
of interest.
as?
Which is a big deal.
So, I mean, it might be people who live in a certain area. It might be people who share an ethnic background. It's kind of a very loose definition. But people who say they're a community of interest in Nevada get the ability to argue that they're a community of interest. And so the people can be involved in ways in this state that I don't think they're involved in other states.
Typically, redistricting will happen across the country every 10 years after the newest census. And that's what happened here in Nevada. Do you expect any attempts at redistricting before the next go around, before the next census?
I don't think so.
Not in Nevada.
No.
Why?
Just because I don't think anybody believes it will have the impact it has in other states.
Right.
This has become a political thing by the administration to try to move votes in the midterm. And is it going to work? It might. I mean, if you would have asked me weeks ago whether this was going to be a typical midterm where the president in power is unpopular, I would have said yes, it's going to be a bloodbath for Republicans. All of those dynamics still exist, but with the redistricting and the seats that it has changed, there's a possibility even under that scenario, Republicans could hold on to both houses.
But let me ask you this, how do you redistrict nonpartisans? When you've got a huge number of nonpartisans and many of them are new voters, how are you supposed to figure out where on the map they go?
You have to go back to a very fundamental, basic one man, one vote, which
Right.
I think is what the founders intended. But you have to, in my opinion, you sort of have to go back to that as a starting point to say, we're going to start with one man or woman. I mean, it's always said one man, but one person, one vote. We're going to go back to that as the basis for making our decisions. Then we'll tweak these other things as we go. But it's interesting because it feels right and it's socially and morally right to make sure during the 1960s that we had black districts and we had inclusion and we had diversity. But what if you replace race with religion or income bracket and redistrict based on that? That wouldn't be acceptable to anybody. So just like many things in government, in my opinion, we need to go back to the founding and say, what do they mean and what are we supposed to be doing? And the only way to deal with what you're talking about is by going back to this basic, fundamental one person, one vote.
Is that what you are promoting in your fight for the establishment of an independent redistricting commission in the state of Nevada?
Yes.
What would
there's-
that accomplish?
So what we were proposing, and it's the Democratic attorneys that sue us to knock it off the ballot every time. What we were saying is let the majority and minority leaders in both houses of our legislature each pick one person. So we're assuming 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, and then they get to pick 3 nonpartisans. So then that way the Republicans and Democrats can't collude because you would need the 3 nonpartisans to go along with you. But our legislature exempts itself from the open meeting law, What we're saying is this commission would take it away from the legislature and be under the open meeting law so we can see what they're doing.
And see how they are attempting to redistrict the
Yes.
state.
Yes.
The attorneys who have fought against your measure, their argument is that what you're proposing does not establish a revenue source to pay for this new entity, and that it would be an unfunded mandate, which the Nevada Constitution prohibits.
Not true. So the Nevada Constitution says that if you run a statutory ballot question, you're going to change a law, you're going to create new law. Then if it's going to cost money, you have to include a tax. In 2022, the Nevada Supreme Court reinterpreted that language to say it also meant constitutional amendment. Even though ballot questions enacting constitutional amendment, that language is not in the Constitution. So what we did is we took down the independent redistricting ballot question and we put up a second ballot question to say the Nevada Constitution does not require you to put taxes in the Constitution if you run a constitutional ballot question.
We have run out of time. Warren Hardy, Sandra Cosgrove, thank you for joining Nevada Week.
Thank you.
We move now to this month's Your Brain Health Matters. Out now is the 10th annual Alzheimer's Drug Development Pipeline Report. It comes from noted Alzheimer's clinician scientist Dr. Jeffrey Cummings with the Kirk Kerkorian School of Medicine at UNLV. We spoke with him just days before he released the report, which he refers to as the Circle of Hope.
The Circle of Hope is a summary figure of all of the drugs that are currently in trials for Alzheimer's disease. There are 192 trials this year testing 158 drugs. So there's a very robust pipeline of drugs that are being tested to see if we can affect all different types of Alzheimer's disease symptoms. And what is really increasing in the pipeline are the drugs that address inflammation in the brain. Because just as you get a knee injury and it swells up and gets inflamed, as the Alzheimer process in the brain causes inflammation to occur. And we think that that makes the disease worse. So the largest category of drugs in the pipeline this year, 28 drugs, address inflammation in the brain. And importantly, every one of them has a different way of affecting inflammation. So we're going to learn what is the best way, what is the best drug to be able to interfere in the inflammatory process.
What was the other drug we were talking about that as I got here, you found out
Yes.
it got FDA approval?
Yes, one of the most important symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, because it is so disabling to the patient and to the caregiver, is agitation. And today, a new drug was approved for the treatment of agitation in Alzheimer's disease. It's called Avolti. It is already approved and on the market for the treatment of depression. And it was realized that the chemistry of this drug suggested that it might also be useful for agitation. There is already one other drug on the market for the treatment of agitation. So this is not the first drug, but it is in a totally different class of drugs. And doctors and patients need alternatives. So we're thrilled that this new drug was approved today.
When someone sees the headline that your new publication has come out and they say, well, did they find a cure? How do you respond to that and sustain hope?
The reason that our work is called the Circle of Hope is because physicians and patients and caregivers can look at that circle and see every drug that's in clinical trials. And they see that there are at least 158 companies that each have a drug that is really working to try to find an answer for Alzheimer's disease. And the progress is likely to be incremental. The first drugs produce a 30% slowing. Well, let's combine that with something else and see, can we get that to 50% slowing? Could we increase it to 75% slowing? And eventually, could we arrest the disease?
And Dr. Cummings says he'd like to see even more clinical trials, but a lack of volunteers is preventing that. Finally, on Nevada Week, July 4th marks the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And in the lead up to it, we're bringing you stories on how Southern Nevadans are observing America at 250. Maria Silva joins us with more on a special photography project, a tribute to our veterans. And Maria, it is a fitting story since we are approaching Memorial Day.
It is a beautiful story and a beautiful project. It's titled 250 Faces of Service and Sacrifice. Some of the veterans featured were World War II veterans, some no longer with us, which is why this project is even more meaningful. The photographer behind the camera was raised here in Nevada. He's a proud Nevadan. He's even known as Henderson's photographer. And when he was searching for a way to celebrate America at 250, he knew exactly what he had to do: honor our veterans and their families.
Dean Whitaker's story is amazing. You know, Dean Whitaker was a 20-year-old navigator for the B-17s and a bombardier.
World War II veteran Dean Whitaker, one of the veterans featured in the photography project, 250 Faces of Sacrifice and Service.
Smile, looking good, looking good.
Photographer Michael Conrad's inspiration for his patriotic and heartfelt project started with a gift from his favorite uncle, Thomas Jefferson Montgomery.
My uncle, Uncle Tom, he was celebrating his 80th birthday about 6-7 years ago. And he gave me the 600 slides from when he was in Korea. He served in Europe, so it was during the Korea time, that conflict. And I made a book for him out of those slides for his birthday, and he had memories of most of the images in there, probably about 80%. And so understanding that and his vision of what he saw in the stories just was phenomenal as a family member. And so I thought there's more stories out there that inspired me to look around and find other veterans who've got those same stories.
Stories like Lorraine's, a 100-year-old Army veteran.
Her smile is just, it's contagious. She was a nurse reserves. There's a name for it. I don't remember the name. But so she served here in different areas in the Southwest because the Army took all the other nurses. So she was part of that corps, but serving here. Just turned 100 not too long ago. Unbelievable woman. She was a pilot and flew some of those World War II test planes. Back in the 50s, women were not pilots.
Michael considers 250 Faces of Service and Sacrifice more than just a photography project, calling it a national tribute. His motto:
because behind every flag, behind every anthem, behind every moment of peace, there's a face. Let's make sure they're not forgotten. I want people to look at their sacrifice and see their weathered hands and see how they built things. Many of these people that came back, these gentlemen, especially World War II, Korea and Vietnam, they were schoolboys when they went over. And they came back, weathered, learned. A lot of them gained education and they trade while they're in the military. And they came back and they built the things that we have today.
The theme of family.
So there's a couple I photographed. Both served in the Marines.
Also an important part of this project.
The gentleman is an ROTC commander at one of the high schools here in town. His daughter's in that program. The military genealogy tree is just amazing to see how many family members have such a great genealogy of military service in their family. And that's important to understand.
The longtime photographer, no stranger to making sure the stories of our veterans are preserved and documented, serving as a photographer on UNLV's Veterans Voices, We're Listening oral history project. And he continues to travel with veterans to Washington, D.C. as part of Honor Flight.
I'm part of Honor Flight in Southern Nevada. I'm the photographer who goes with me every 6 months to photograph the history and the stories, the behind the scenes. I'm kind of a fly on the wall at that flight. So I want to capture the emotions and what these veterans are feeling, what they went through and suffered and saw. And many of them just don't talk about it. You know, it's hard. And you talk about PTSD. A lot of these guys, they didn't know back then what it was, but they had it. They had a form of it, or they had that. And so it's nice that on Honor Flight, they get to have a little bit of closure. It's nice on this project I'm doing, they get to see a little bit of closure, a little bit of recognition.
Many of the brave veterans featured in the project, sadly, are no longer with us, including Michael's Uncle Tom and Dean Whitaker.
it just breaks your heart because there's such great treasure that we have, and we need to remember that treasure on there and what they've given us on through that.
And as we prepare to celebrate 250 years of independence, Michael wants us all to reflect on this.
When we see the flag and we sing the anthem, when we see the fireworks, we need to remember why we have those celebrations. It's just not about the parties. It's not about the fun and the drinking and the eating and all that stuff. It's about our families coming together. And we're able to come together because of men and women who have served this country for 250 years and have given us the different freedoms. You know, and as you look back at some of the battles that our country's gone through, not a perfect country, but yet we've sustained and we've given people the freedom to choose what they like to do.
More than just these stunning portraits, you also learn about these veterans and their service and families. On the website, 250faces.com, you will find stories behind the faces. Michael is still working on that part of the project and is adding more stories and photos as we speak. And Amber, Michael also plans to put together a book and a gallery exhibition. Again, just another way to honor, respect, and show love to these veterans and their families.
I would love to see that exhibit, and thank you for that story, Maria. And thank you for joining us. For any of the resources discussed, including a link to that project and a link with more on how you or a loved one can join a clinical research trial for Alzheimer's, go to vegaspbs.org, and we'll see you next week on Nevada Week.